Welcome to Spiritual Dialogue with Father Udon de Castro. We are still here at Cariana Lay Monastic of Unity. I'm your host, Brother Lodi. With us is Sister Tachi. Sister Tachi?
Yes, Father, I was just thinking, right, jump into it. Peace and security is very important for the salvation of soul. I mean, it is a very good ingredient. It is the environment necessary, is it?
Yes, in fact, that's part of the doctrine of divine providence. That we must have as much as possible peace and solitude and silence and so on. That's why peace and security is the greatest obligation of a state. If you go through politics, the science of politics is to create an atmosphere of peace and security in the nations because it cannot progress in any way without peace and security. And that's good politics. The basis of politicians, of politics, the science of politics is peace and security. And that's part of divine providence. So we're trying to prove that this proposal of Pope Francis and many bishops and many nations like Canada and Germany, and Australia and so on, to have open doors towards immigrants is against the teachings of the Catholic Church, especially two teachings of the Catholic Church. Very important teachings. First is divine providence and the teaching on charity. And because this proposal of open doors immigration is against these two great teachings of the Catholic Church, within the Catholic Church, that proposal is sinful because it goes against the teachings of Christ. It is sinful. And we're showing precisely why it is sinful, because it goes against divine providence. You're going against God's will, against God's plan of salvation. You are going against God's plan of salvation. So in effect, you are sending people to hell.
Yes.
And of course, if you send people to hell, you go to hell. I'm not surprised, Brother Lord, that you did not realize that. Because the dogma on divine providence is one of the most complex teachings of the Catholic Church. It's very complex. Very few know how it works. That's why Pope Francis doesn't know how it works. That's why he issued that Laudato Si, thinking that global climate can be controlled by man. That's the most ridiculous thing in Catholic teaching. The Catholic Church finds that ridiculous because everything is in the control of God. That's divine providence. Everything is under God's control. That's divine providence. Not controlled by man, or controlled by smog or by industry or so on. No, it's not. It is such a complex thing that I'm not surprised that Pope Francis doesn't know about it. I'm not surprised many bishops, US, especially Europe, doesn't seem to know about it. They don't know anything about divine providence. And that's why we're saying you lay people are confused because your own bishops and priests don't know it. But in theology, it's one of the most complex treatises. The treatise on divine providence, the textbook we use, is 2.5 inches thick. That's how complex it is. Of course, St. Thomas of Aquinas discusses it in a shorter way, in secunde. It's easy to understand. And for our listeners, all you have to do is go to St. Thomas of Aquinas, Summa Theologica. It's explained very simple. That's what you were saying, Brother Lord. It's simple and easy.
Yes,
He does it very simply and in a very easy way. So, the open door immigration is a proposition to go against divine providence, against the will of God. And for any Catholic in good standing, that's very clearly a sin. I've been saying this precisely before because precisely Filipinos like to go to the United States very much. And I've been saying that don't do that, that's a sin. And they cannot imagine why going to America is a sin.
To stay, di ba, Father? To stay.
Well,
Di
that's the
ba? To
sin.
stay. That is the sin, di ba, Father? I mean, when you go there to migrate,
Yeah.
di ba? Not to visit.
Like,
If there's a
well,
spiritual purpose.
Well,
How can you say that?
you know,
I
yeah.
know, Father.
the only
Yeah,
good
yeah.
reason
Yeah.
for going to America is
Okay.
to convert, to preach as Christ says, to go there, baptize them,
Okay.
teach them His commands, and so on like that.
Okay. Okay.
In other words, to evangelize
In
them,
other words-
which America needs a lot of evangelization right now. No?
Which is not the purpose we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not only that, remember that according to Pope Leo XIII, the very way of life of America is a heresy.
Oh my gosh.
It's called the heresy of Americanism. Because their way of life really is very
Do what you
secular. It's very worldly, it's very pagan,
Very materialistic.
very materialistic. It is really a way of life that is full of heresy. It is a heretical way of life called Americanism, where money is practically the God.
Yes, Father.
So that is divine providence, and I said I'm not surprised that very few people know that. But for monastic orders like us, that's of the utmost importance. Because in your way of life, you have to follow the flow of divine providence. It is always saying, your will be done, your will be done, your will be done, your will be done. That is monastic life, to follow the flow of divine providence and follow it.
It's to follow the will of God.
It is. Essentially, it's that.
Yes.
And open door policy of accepting immigrants is going against that. But let's stop there for a while and go to the second command of Christ, which is violated by this practice and proposal. It's against charity. Accepting immigrants is accepting people that are not in the right order. St. Thomas of Aquinas has very clearly stated that there is an order in charity. When you love your neighbor, there is an order. You cannot love Lodi, your friend, ahead of your wife.
Okay.
One question, how do we love our neighbor? I've been hearing love your neighbor, but how do we love our fellow man?
That's easier to explain. But what we're discussing right now is what they're violating. It's not the definition of love. What they're going against is the order of love that we must show.
Okay.
What is this order of love that we must
In other words, Lord, you cannot love your enemies ahead of loving your children.
Yes, of course, Father.
That sounds sensible, isn't
Yes,
it?
Father.
So in charity, according to St. Thomas of Aquinas, there is an order. You must love God first,
Yes,
not your wife first.
uh,
In fact, if you love your wife ahead of God, that's a sin.
yes.
Because you change the order. So to love immigrants before loving your co-Filipino is a sin. Because you're following the wrong order.
Yes.
You must love the Filipinos first before you love immigrants.
Yes.
So there is an order in charity. You must love God first, your wife next, your children next, your neighbor next, then maybe lastly, the immigrants.
It follows, Father.
But the proposal of Pope Francis and of the UN, United Nations, of Cardinal Tagle, American bishops, European bishops, is to love your immigrants first. Let's go to the Philippines.
Yes, Father.
The mudslide in Bohol killed many Filipinos, displaced many Filipinos. The government has not yet helped them, and that was years ago. Has not yet helped them. The obligation of charity for the Philippine government is on the people of Bohol, the Filipino people of Bohol, not immigrants.
Yes, of course, Father.
For the Philippine government to love the immigrants ahead of the Filipinos of Bohol is a sin. And yet that's the proposal given by the bishops to the Philippine government. Another example, we have Undoy,
Later.
the superstorm in Cebu, etc. If you go to that area, the people have not been helped up to now.
My God.
In the latest news, local news, all those houses built by the government for them are inhabitable, cannot be used. They were so badly built by the government. Is that charity? To badly build houses for our own Filipino, and now they're going to receive immigrants and house them because that will be the command and the order of the United Nations when we accept them. The squatters. You, Brother Lodi, has been complaining about squatters.
Yes, Father.
They live miserable lives,
Very miserable, Father.
and the government is not helping them. Neither is the Catholic Church helping them. But we are told to receive immigrants and neglect these Filipino people who are just around us. And they're not only Filipinos, they're Catholics. So notice that the order of loving your neighbor is wrong.
Yes,
And
Father.
because it is wrong, it is sinful. They are sinning against charity.
I was just
Yeah,
thinking,
sister?
the love of neighbor. Of course, it just is to make it clear to love our own Catholics more than other religions.
Should
Hindi
be.
ba? That's a first, no?
In fact, I didn't even say Catholic, I
Yeah.
just said Filipinos.
Filipinos,
you
di ba?
know.
Hindi, pero that's a no, di ba? And the Filipinos, tama. Because just to make it clear, if we accept them, you will build a house for them. You will have to see that
You
they're
have
fed,
to,
that you will be.
Electricity and water and everything.
And while you've not done it for our own.
We have not done it for our own.
Oh, it's so
This is
clear.
the reason why we live miserably, because there is no charity.
Not only that, put it this way, we live miserably because God is not blessing us. And the reason God is not blessing us is because we're going against His commandment on
This is
divine
sin.
providence and going against His commandment of love. In America, most of the bishops there are proposing also open door policy because these bishops are not thinking. They're ignorant of charity and they're ignorant of divine providence. And I'm not saying that. It was Pope Benedict who said that. They have problems. And they haven't solved their problems. Opioids is the biggest problem in America. Opioids.
What's that?
What's that, Father?
What's that, Father?
These are drugs, habit-forming
Oh, I
drugs.
see.
Like opium or something
Okay.
like that. And they're going to receive immigrants who are the seller of opioids.
Ganun.
All these narcotics come from Mexico,
Mhm.
and Donald Trump wants to close it to save the American people. And the bishops want to
Encouraging to
encourage
migrate.
the Mexicans to come in and propagate all this opium and opioids.
Because that's what will happen.
That will happen. Meaning to say, to open the door is a lack of charity for the
The Americans,
Americans. And many of these Americans who become addicts are Catholics.
Yes.
We are in big trouble, Father.
Yeah, the problem is why are bishops are the ones who are proposing this, who are propagating all these doctrines? Just to show you how far and how deep down our bishops have become. How can you save the lay people when our bishops are like this, going against Catholic doctrines, especially the most important doctrines of divine providence and charity?
That's the wrong notion kasi of charity, Father, di ba? They want to,
Yes, their
yeah?
notions of charity is so emotional. It's
Yun.
just like Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
Lodi, did Romeo and Juliet go to heaven because of their love for one another?
I doubt, Father.
They committed suicide.
Yeah, which is against the law of God.
And that's the kind of charity our bishops are proposing, the kind of charity we must show to the immigrants, just an emotional, romantic charity. In fact, they have not given a decent reason. Anybody in the world, the whole world is proposing open door policy, but not one of them has given a decent, common sense reason why we should do that.
Yeah.
There should be a reason. That it could be they find a reason that it's good for the people, for us, and for the people coming in. And
It
it's
must be
neither, right?
good-
For
well,
both.
Saint Paul said
Diba?
it must
For
be
both.
good for
Both.
all, yeah, for
all.
everyone.
Common good,
yeah.
right?
Mm.
Common good.
We have only 1 minute, Father.
Well, so we have shown why what the bishops are teaching right now, and this is the majority of the bishops in the world and in the Philippines, their proposal for accepting of immigrants is against Catholic teachings. And if this is against Catholic teaching, it's not difficult to suspect that these bishops are not Catholic bishops.
Meantime, what shall we do, Father? Lay people like us.
Well, that's a longer story. We shall solve that the moment we settle the confusion.
Okay. Thank you, Father. Thank you for watching Spiritual Dialogue with Father Rodon de Castro. See you next time, and thank you so much.
Hosanna, Hosanna.